Hi, Ivan. Welcome to the PowerTalk Show powered by Business Talks Weekly. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and joining our channel today. Before we dive into a conversation, can we run through your professional background and how are you helping businesses and individuals tackle finance?
Hey, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's my pleasure. Yeah, so my professional background, I used to work in bank compliance. In the United States, there's a law called the Bank Secrecy Act that allows banks to look at and review the counts of personal finances as well as business finances. And so that's from a criminal investigation perspective. And so I have a lot of experience looking through, hundreds, if not thousands of different businesses and different industries. I had to understand, what kind of activity was normal for businesses, right? So certain supplier relationships, customer relationships, how businesses operated, how funds went in and out of the businesses, and so did a lot of work really understanding the landscape of business internationally, and so really pulled on a lot of that experience to launch the business that I'm doing today. I'm currently what I'm doing is I'm connecting business owners that are looking to sell their business to business buyers that are looking to buy business. And so, 80% of businesses in the United States never sell. And so there's a real huge problem. And I think it comes down to connecting the right people to one another, specifically with businesses under $2 million in revenue.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for that background. When you say you are helping businesses buy other businesses, are you in contact with investors or venture capitalists who are about to buy any company that they want to, they want to expand their portfolio?
Yeah, so our buyers range from those, private equity firms, venture capitalists, all the way down to just someone who's working a 9 to 5 job, who's got some money saved up, who has some corporate experience, and like, hey, I want to buy a business, I want to own my own thing, and so they come to my platform looking for businesses that they can buy.
Even in that case, can you explain to me what are the parameters or what are the criterias do these in venture capitalists or individual investors look at when they evaluate a business to buy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I know a lot of them are looking for the cash flow, right, on the business. I mean, that's huge. And because the market that I really target is those smaller businesses, those businesses tend to struggle quite a bit as far as being businesses that people want, and that's probably one of the reasons why not a lot of them sell. But a lot of times when you're looking at a business, you got to think about it as if I'm taking out a huge loan to purchase this business, you have debt servicing on that loan, right? And so the businesses that you're buying has to be able to not only pay off that debt servicing, but they also have to pay off any employee turnover that you happen to have when you first come in, right? You might ruffle some feathers. You have to be able to, suppliers leave, customers leave. There's going to be a lot of changes, and so the business needs to have a good, strong reputation. It needs to be able to be survive well into the future, have good prospects, as well as have the money to, again, pay for that debt and for any new buyer that's acquiring that business. Otherwise, I mean, you can buy a distressed business, one that's underwater, but it takes a certain special type of person with certain experience to actually buy those businesses and make those profitable.
Absolutely makes sense. And I have noticed like over the past decade, with so much funding coming into the startups, many startups were burning money and looking at, spending more on branding and scalability. So will investors be interested in such a company in terms of the cash flow having negative flow, but the brand value and the branding is very high?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you think of like a startup company, I think 90% of startups failed in the first year. And then I think the statistics start to dwindle down where they become more successful the longer that they stay in business. But when you have a business that's already been in play for, 5, 10, 15 years, the likelihood of that business to continue on and stay active and viable, the percentage is way higher than a startup, and so there is a big pull to people wanting to buy established businesses with reputations. They already have a customer following, brand recognition. They have all these things in place that kind of come with that purchase of the business, and I think I mean, there's value in that, right? One of the things I'm struggling with as a startup is no one knows who I am, right? And so, I'm on this podcast, I'm on everything, I'm doing everything I can to get the word out there. And so, if I had bought a business like this, the word would already been out there, and I could build upon that. But the foundation for my startup, for example, is not as robust as let's say a business that's been in business for 5 or 10 years. And so there's a lot of financial incentive to buy an established business for sure.
Absolutely makes sense. And as you mentioned, Biz Retire, what kind of services do you provide under Biz Retire other than buying and selling of businesses? Because when I first understood the name, I also thought like you're providing individual services to end users as well.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. One of the things about startups is you go to market with an idea, a concept that you think is going to be viable, and then you test it on the marketplace. You realize, okay, well, we were sort of right on some things and we were wrong on other things. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize is that within this space, there's not a lot of education specifically for business owners. There's more education on the buyer side, and that's why we're seeing a huge wave of buyers coming to the market. But on the seller side, there's not. And so one of the things that I'm trying to think of it is like a triangle, right? So you have, buyers, sellers, and then advisors. And so both buyers and sellers both need advisors, and those advisors need to find the buyers and sellers. And so, one of the things is if you're a business owner, you have a successful business, you ran it for, 40 years or whatever it is, you could sell your business, but you could also talk to an advisor, figure out how to hire an executive team, maybe run it for a couple more years, get it running, and just let the business run on itself and collect a paycheck. That's another option. That's not something that I pretend to know how to do. I like to refer owners to the people that can make that kind of thing happen. But, I think that there should be multiple options because one of the biggest go-to in the industry when you're selling a business is, "Hey, let me go sell with a business broker," which is kind of like a real estate agent for businesses, right? And broker, all they do is list it on a platform, and there's this saying called "list it and leave it." So they put it on there, and they just kinda wait and see what happens, and, they take anywhere from a 5 to 20% commission. On $1,000,000, that's anywhere from 50,000 to $200,000, and they can come list it on my platform for, a very small fee fraction of that. And so the thing is like there's more options out there for people to explore and to find out, right? There's more things than just closing the doors of your business or listing it with the business broker. And I think that's what it really comes down to is educating the people and really getting the word out there that there are other options.
Absolutely makes sense. And even as you mentioned about this, what about the due diligence? There might be certain cases where the investors are interested in beginning, but when they do the due diligence due to certain aspects, they find, okay, this is not something that they should add into their bucket. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. One of the things that I try to build into my business is I want to be as hands off as possible. And so as a startup founder, I don't want to be in the middle of negotiations. I don't want to be like sued because I provided the wrong information or so
Yeah.
what I've really created a platform to connect buyer and seller together. And the goal is that buyer and seller goes off platform and they negotiate those deals, and so the way that I look at it, so if a business owner's business is worth $1,000,000 and they would have to pay a broker $100,000, instead of paying a broker $100,000 to list it with us for $100 a month, right? So it's a fraction, and then use the other $999,900 to go hire a lawyer, go hire an accountant, go hire the professionals that can help with the due diligence. And the same on the buyer side. If you look at it this way, the buyers, when the broker is the middleman, the buyer has to communicate 4 times as much, right? So it's buyer to broker, broker to seller, seller back to broker, broker back to buyer. And so it makes the process longer. And then the
Yeah.
broker gets the ultimate say on the deal. And when you're going to the closing table, the buyer and the seller don't know each other. And so then the seller's like, I don't like this guy. He's not a good fit for my community. He's not a good fit for my culture. And so what my platform does is it brings those two parties together. And the buyer, knowing that the seller doesn't have the commission, the seller's price might be a little bit more negotiable. Whereas with a broker, because the broker has a higher commission, it may not be as much negotiable as with my platform. And so, the buyer can win. Maybe they get a little discount. The seller can win. You really have more money to close the business, and they walk away with. And like I said, all the due diligence and all that stuff is done outside the platform. The way I look at it is, if you're a business owner, you're a very intelligent person. If you're looking to buy a business, you should be a very intelligent person. And I think those two parties can navigate all that due diligence with experts as needed.
Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. That's interesting. Even that brings me to a different question now. How does technology and especially AI work around all this? Is there any possibility that in the future AI advancement or LLM models will come into play, which will help connect the buyer and seller in a more efficient way?
Yeah, I do think that there is room for it. The problem with AI, at least how it's being used now, it's used in a large capacity to find potential owners looking to sell their business. And which is helpful. But the problem is we have a generation of owners that are the baby boomers, and they're not tech savvy. They've probably been scammed more than any other generation, and they're not happy with cold calls. And so what happens is buyers will use the technology to find the information, call them, and then it's just kind of like, hey, I don't want to talk to you. And so there's not a lot of trust with AI right now, especially in that generation. I do think there's a future, and this is one of the things I wrote an article on is that I feel like so business brokers have more or less been the same for 250 years, at least in the United States. There's really not been any innovation in how they do business. And one of the things that I'm trying to work on is I feel like in the future, business brokers will essentially go extinct. Not now, great business brokers, excellent business brokers will always stand the test of time. I do believe that. But I do think that business brokers that are mediocre or bad will go out of business. And I think my platform actually provides kind of what the biggest platform, my biggest competitor is, plus a business broker. So if you were to take the goods of both of those and they were to have a baby, we kind of provide both of those things for both buyers and sellers. I don't foresee business brokers being around and much force in 10, 15, 20 years. And I think it is because of technology. I think because there will be a more tech savvy and more tech literate, buyer and seller population. And they'll realize that the actual value that the business brokers bring is not worth it. I don't want to talk too much here, but I want to say that I think there's a failure tax, and this is one of the reasons why I think business brokers are becoming less adequate is because business brokers only sell 20% of the businesses they list. And so when they do sell it, they have to make up money from the time they spent on the other four that were failures. And so who pays that fee? It's the one who was successful. And so
Yeah.
business owners that are successful are now paying the fees for the failures, and that's not fair. And so there's a lot of value that's being lost that they're not getting. And so it'll eventually come to the mind of the owners like, why am I paying for your failure? I want to actually pay for results and what I'm getting. And so I think there will be a shift in tide and technology, and I'm hoping our company is on the forefront of that.
That's interesting. We'll wait and watch. And in that case, as you mentioned, what is next for you? What is your vision for the next 3 to 5 years? Where are you heading?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I want to create tools for owners that make sense. I definitely want to serve the underprivileged population. I would say the 2 million and under businesses. Most advisors and people want to buy the businesses that are much larger, and so there's very little services for this niche. But the interesting thing is 97% of all businesses in the United States fall under this 2 million and under, and so there's a large market for it. Creating tools like I want to do like a reverse mortgage. So I want owners to see if a buyer were to finance the business at your price, this is how much cash flow they would have. This is how much. And sometimes, when you have a smaller owner, they want to retire, so they have this number in mind that's not realistic. And so
Yeah.
I want to have like a reverse mortgage so they can understand that. I want to do like a referral program where I can connect owners and advisors and buyers. Those are some things on the list. And I've got some other things cooking that I hope will really help break some industry standards, but we'll see. That'll require some more time and patience.
Sounds wonderful. What advice would you give to a C-level executive or a founder who is looking to sell their business? And what advice would you give to a VC or an investor who is looking to buy a business in this market?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So looking to sell your business, I think the thing is when you create a product or service, you're always thinking about your customer. You're thinking about what do they want? How do I deliver it to them? How do I get it to them? But oftentimes when people are looking to sell a business, they think about themselves. They have to look at their business as actually a product. You're designing and packaging a product for sale. So how do you make your business the most appetizing and most interesting and most valuable to the buyer? Because the buyer is the one that's going to give you the money. And so your business doesn't have to look good to you. They don't care about, blood, sweat, and tears. They don't care about that your grandmother started it. They don't care. They want to know the things that are important to them. And I would say as a person selling a business, you need to put your buyer cap on and you think, okay, what can I do to make this business the most attractive? And then, also, do you even need to sell your business? That's another thing. Like, can you work with an advisor, keep the business in the family? Maybe your family doesn't want to run it, but can you hire someone to run it for you and still live a nice life and keep the business running and operating well? And so I would challenge the sell assumption. Do you need to sell it in the first place? For the buyers,
Yeah.
there are a lot of private equity and venture capitalists and all these people trying to buy businesses. I kind of hope that they won't. I don't want to live in a world where, 80 or 90% of my businesses are ran by organizations that are only seeking the bottom line and profit. I want businesses to stay in the hands of small business owners that actually care about the communities, that go to community events, that volunteer at the church, that care about, the widow and care about the people that are hurting within the community. Those are the type of businesses that I hope. And so for them, I would say, don't buy businesses. I really, but I would say people who have executive experience that have money that want a piece of the pie on their own, I would say really understand the business buying process, have your financials in order, know what you're looking for, work with an advisor, take some classes if you have the resources, and actually be a competitive buyer on the market because there's a lot of buyers that create so much noise. And so go out there, buy businesses, be competitive. And so I would say, I would really encourage just the average person to really step up and take it seriously and get a business.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you so much for joining our channel today. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.